Come on. All right, here we are, Lord Jesus. Okay, so we're going to retell Christmas this morning. I might have that on slide. Look at that, retelling Christmas. We're taking a look at Luke 2. We're journeying through the Gospel of Luke, and we're going to cross-reference that little passage with Matthew 2. Now, this is really funny. So you open your Bible to Luke 2 and Matthew 2. If you don't have a Bible, just use your phone, type it in a search engine, and you can read along with us. We're not going to put the scriptures up. But this is really interesting because when I was in the Holy Land, I got to spend a few weeks in the Holy Land. We retraced the Gospel of Mark. It was so impactful for me because I think a part of my heart had sort of died on the way Americans do church. You know what I'm saying? And I needed to get my hands back into the dirt, or into the dirt maybe for the first time, of where Jesus walked and lived, and kind of ask the questions, what is church? How do we journey with him? What does a relationship with God look like? And it was really impactful for me. And as we start on Luke 2 here, we're going to read about a little village. Does anybody know what it's called? Bethlehem. Come on, somebody said it. Very good. So a little village called Bethlehem. And what's fascinating to me is there's a big schism in the church you probably don't even know about in Bethlehem. And here's the schism. The Eastern church says Jesus was born in a cave. Have you ever heard that? Okay. The Western church says Jesus was born where? We all know this. Like a barn. Like a barn. We call it a stable, but the image that we always portray is a barn. And I'm not sure that either of those two are accurate. So when I was in the Holy Land, I sort of journeyed on a whole thing of exploration. What really happened? What did this look like? And I want to take you down it today. I'm using a guy, most of the research comes from a guy named Dr. Kenneth Bailey. I love him. He is no longer alive. He was a scholar that lived in the Holy Land for 50 years, and just incredible. So anyway, follow along, and here's the question. Was Jesus born in a barn? Was Jesus born in a cave? What really happened that night? Because usually we have this idea that Joseph is walking in, and what's he carrying behind him? Come on. A donkey, right? And what's on the donkey? Mary, and she's already, like they don't say this, but you get this idea that she's already in the throes of labor, they're already watching the clock and doing the breathing exercises, and they come in really hot and panicked because there's no what? There's no room. So you get this idea that Joseph is like running around this little village, and he's like, do you have room? Do you have space for me? Can I stay here? And there's no space, and no one wants anything to do with him, so they send him out to a little, like a barn or a hut or something, and there's some donkeys and cows and sheep and whatever, right? So here's the question. Do you think that's accurate? And I'm so glad I got to do this not on Christmas, because I'd really bother some people on Christmas. Like, this is great. Christmas in whatever it is, June or July, is way better. So if I ruffle your feathers, come on, here we go. I am going to totally change your view of what happened that night. But I don't think it diminishes the significance. I actually think there's some richness in the simplicity that we're going to discover. Yeah? And we're heading towards communion. Okay, Luke 2. And let's start reading, but as we do, I'm laughing because when I was 8 years old, I memorized Luke 2, 1 through 7. It was the very first thing I said on a microphone, on a stage. I was like 7 years old, and I was like shaking, and I memorized it and looked in the mirror, and I was wearing a Joseph costume. I got to be Joseph, and I almost reproduced that for y'all, but I decided not to. Thank you for laughing. Okay, Luke 2, I'm reading out of the NIV. I'm going to start reading in verse 1. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree. Who's that guy? He's the Roman emperor, okay? Why does he matter? Who rules the Holy Land? Caesar, Rome, okay. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. That includes the Holy Land. That includes Jerusalem. That includes Nazareth. That includes Bethlehem. Verse 2. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was the governor of Syria. And everyone went to their own town to register. So if we took a census like this today and you had to go back to where you were born or where you came from, where would you go? We'd go all over the show, wouldn't we? We'd be going back to all sorts of places. Okay, so that is what is happening. Verse 3, everyone went to their own town to register. Verse 4, so Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. What a big sentence. So my guess is when this was originally written, it was, so Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to the city of David, or to the town of David. And I'm guessing that Dr. Luke, because he was not a Jew, he was a Gentile, added Bethlehem for those of us who weren't Jews. Okay? So, because everyone would have known, if I said the city of David, you would have known Bethlehem. Everybody. Like, we didn't need to call it Bethlehem. It was called the city of David, but people who didn't know or weren't Jewish, they had to call it Bethlehem. Okay, so you're tracking. All right, now this is also interesting. Joseph went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee. It's actually south. Went up. Like, went which way? Up, which is usually north. Okay, but he went south. It's elevation. Up to Jerusalem. So Bethlehem, or the city of David, was right outside Jerusalem, just a couple of miles, maybe 4.5 miles. And it was a raise in elevation from Nazareth. So he took the journey. It was actually south, but he went up in elevation. That's why it says that. Okay, so he went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David. Now, why is it called the town of David? All right, let's pause there a second. If you're not a church person, or you're not a Bible person, and you haven't read a lot or, been in the Bible a lot, that's okay. Take a big, deep breath. If you're a doubter or an atheist or an unbeliever, or however you self-define, that's okay too. Just jump in with us. But for those of you who've been in a while, why is this the town of David? Who was born there? David. And who was David in the Old Testament? The king. And he's like the king. He's like the king by which all other kings are measured. Is it because he was perfect? No. Why does the Bible say he was the king by which all other kings are measured? Because his heart was postured before God in such a way. He actually had some egregious sin in his life. That's not what this is about. But it's not that he had egregious sin. It's that he repented and his heart was postured to obey and listen and follow the Lord Jesus. So David was actually anointed. We could go back to the book of Samuel. David was anointed as this young little red-faced, literally it says, sheep tender. And he was so insignificant in his family that when the prophet came to anoint the new king, his dad didn't even think he was important enough to bring him in from the fields. So he just left his hide out there. And the prophet went, no, it's none of these kids. There must be another kid. Do you have another kid? And the dad's like, well, yeah, there's my little young loser son, basically. I mean, that's what he's saying. By not inviting him to the party, he's saying, well, there's this young little, whippersnapper who's kind of a worthless red-faced dude, and he's still out there. And Samuel's like, hey, the prophet was like, we're not even going to sit down until the young whippersnapper, red-faced loser arrives. And they didn't. And guess who got anointed king? David, because God looks at the heart. That's literally what the text said. God looks at the heart. So David becomes the greatest king, arguably. Solomon was great, but no one was great like David. So the Old Testament prophecies are all sort of pointing that there will be a new king, the Messiah, the Son of Man, is what Jesus called himself, referencing the book of Daniel, but that he would come in sort of the legacy and line of King David. So everyone's waiting for the Messiah, and they're waiting for someone to be born in Bethlehem in the line of King David. All right, you're tracking. Well done. Okay, so who does Joseph belong to? The house and line of David. So he went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and expecting a child. This is kind of interesting. I just threw another Bible up here earlier for communion. But in my ESV translation, it says, was his fiancé. Anybody have that? Betrothed nor fiance do an adequate justice here. What betrothed meant in this case was, in order to break a betrothal, you actually had to go through a formal divorce process. Like, this is really serious. Okay, so Joseph went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. So, who's his great, grandfather? King David. Was King David famous? 100%. Was there any Jewish person alive that didn't know about King David? No. If you were King David's grandkid, do you think your neighbors knew it? Okay, that's going to be important. Verse 5, he went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. Verse 6, while they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. Circle verse 6. So did the baby come the first night? Did they ride in hot on a donkey with Mary mid-contraction? I mean, we have this image. It's almost become like mythology. Like I could have the guy up here with a little thing on his head and Mary, and she's pregnant, she's sitting on a donkey, and they're running in late, and you get this idea that, I mean, like, think about this for just a second. Abby and I just went on a vacation down to Florida, and I waited and she waited until the very last minute. We didn't even book a hotel. We just drove into town and went, I wonder where we'll stay. Do you think that happened? If you've ever met Abby, you know that didn't happen. I might have done that before I was married and had kids, but I would never do that now. So before we ever left our house, what did we do? We're looking at like Airbnb, we're looking at hotels, we like to have a kitchen, so we prefer an Airbnb, we want to live life the way we want to live it, so okay. But before we ever leave, what do we know that we're going to? A place. Okay, so I mean, I've been on a couple surf trips where I went and didn't know the place I was going to stay. That's been a long time ago. I was okay sleeping in a board bag or something at that point, but not anymore. So before you ever even leave, you make a plan. So what's crazy about the way we tell the story of Joseph and the story of Mary is, if you really think about it, we tell this story sort of like Joseph is like a raging idiot. Did he not know she was pregnant? Did she not know, she was going to have a baby? And so he just decides, I'll just wait till the last minute. And we'll wait till she's having contractions, because women love to travel when they're 9 months pregnant. I mean, I bet riding on a donkey in the middle of the Holy Land, sun and heat, I bet that was what Mary wanted to do when she was 9 months pregnant. You hear me? So we get this idea that he waits until the last minute. He has no clue where he's going to go. I'll just roll in, and we'll see what happens when I arrive. Okay, let's keep going and see what happens. So he went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and expecting a child. Who's the child? Jesus, well done. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. I cannot fully translate that Greek. It doesn't say how long, but it's clear to me that they were there for some season of time, 1 day, 10 days, 1 month, 2 months, I don't know, but they were there well in advance of what? The baby being born. Guarantee it. The time came for the baby to be born, verse 7, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son, and she wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. Circle guest room. Okay, so let's just walk down a few things here. This is an aside. I don't know how important it is, but about 200 years after the life and death of Christ, it's called the Proto-Evangelium of James was written, or the Gospel of James. Now, it was written by someone who had nothing to do with James, wasn't either of the Jameses found in the Bible. Its facts are absolutely unreliable, and because it's unreliable, guess what? It's not in the canon of Scripture. Does that make sense? Okay, now, if you read it, though, it's worth the read if you have any interest, because much of what we think of as the Christmas story actually comes from the Gospel of James, which is no gospel at all. That's really funny. So we've taken this idea of him coming in hot on a donkey and all the business and staying in a stable in this little barn and, whatever. We've all sort of taken it from that. I don't know where it happened, but somehow here in the West, that's what we've done. Okay, so now let's just pause there and think for just a minute. When in every rural culture I can find, everywhere, in every rural culture I've ever looked at, when a woman is pregnant and about to have a baby, what do the other women in the rural town or culture or city do? Come on, y'all. We get this idea that Mary is like sent out to the stable, the barn, which absolutely defies every rural culture I have ever seen. Certainly the rural culture in the Holy Land. So in the Holy Land, Mary rolls into Bethlehem. We don't know how many days before she's before she gives birth. Everybody noticed she's about to give birth. This is no secret, right? Okay. So immediately when she goes into labor, what do the local women do? They would gather around. It doesn't matter how she got pregnant at that point. It doesn't matter. No one would even ask that question. It's still the same today. If you find a woman giving birth anywhere in any city, someone will pick that woman up and take her where? To a hospital. And is the hospital going to say, who got you pregnant? How did you get pregnant? Was this in wedlock? No. What does the hospital do? Deliver the baby. They have the baby. Okay, so you get this idea, though, that Mary was just out by herself. It absolutely defies all even cultural logic of any rural village anywhere. Now, one more step to this. In the Holy Land, the honor of the village, like we don't think a lot about this. Like honor is a different thing in our culture. Like if I as a pastor or somebody in our church does something that is dishonorable or you don't like, you just go, well, fine, I'm leaving. And you leave. But in this culture and day and age, if someone in that church or someone, you would break the honor of the whole. You follow me? It's a collective mindset. We're like rugged individualists in America. This is a collective mindset. So there is pride in the village. There is pride in the whole. There is pride in Bethlehem. And there's pride because I live in the city of David. So there's massive pride. So do you think for a minute that the women and even the men in the village of Bethlehem are going to let some poor woman who's about to burst with baby have a baby out in the... You hear me? I'm telling you, it's not the way it happened. It doesn't defy the text. It's just that there's some mythology that's grown up around our understanding of the text that isn't totally wrong, but I think there's a better interpretation. Okay, so, the other thing is Joseph was going back to the village of what? His origin, his birth, okay. We don't know if he was fully born there or if his legacy and lineage were there, but all he would have to do is roll in, and I have it written here somewhere. I am Joseph, son of Heli, son of Mathat, son of Levi, and everybody in the village would have known Heli, Mathat, and the whole line, right? Okay, let me try to change the imagery here for a minute. I went to high school and graduated with like 520 people or something. Our whole high school had, I think, 2,500 people. There was never a time in my high school journey where if someone walked into any public cafeteria or setting or class or whatever, and I looked at somebody and said, hey, who is that somebody around me wouldn't know them. Oh, that's so-and-so, and they hang out with them, and they play this sport, and they do this, because we're a small community. Okay, so this is the same thing. I mean, Bethlehem's probably 1,000 people, maybe 1,500 people. Do you think everybody knew that Joseph was from Bethlehem? And all he had to do was go in and go, hey, this is my granddaddy, this is my great-granddaddy, and what is everybody doing? Come on, brother, we got a space for you. Because he was known, and you don't kick out your own people. You just don't do that. It was never done. Now, let's take this a step further. Joseph is actually the great-grandson of who? David. So let's now separate that for just a second. Joseph could have rolled back into Bethlehem and just said, hey, my great-granddaddy was this, and my granddaddy was this, and my dad was this, and everybody would have said, come on. But now take this a step further. The moment you get this sense that David is related to this famous guy named, Joseph, thank you, I messed up. Joseph is related to this famous guy named David, like really famous. Like everybody loves David. We're all waiting for a new King David. He's going to be the Messiah. So Joseph is related to this famous guy named David. So, all right, let's change the metaphor here a minute. When the son or daughter of a president or a statesperson shows up in a city, do we know who they are? Do you think there's any chance that Joseph couldn't roll in that city and everybody wouldn't have known that he was royalty? 1,000 people? Like, go back to me sitting in the cafeteria. Hey, who's that? I don't never seen them before. Oh, they're so-and-so. They play this sport. They do this. They're a dork. Or they're cool. Joseph rolls in. Not only does everyone know he lives in the city, but secondarily, everyone knows that he is royalty. Like he actually does not walk like with his head down. And no. He's going to be shoulders back, head up, because royal blood flows in his veins. And it doesn't matter if he's poor and he's a carpenter. He still knows who he is. Got it? So there's not a even slight bit of a chance that Joseph could have rolled into that city and not been known that he was number one, royalty, and number two, that people actually knew his grandparents. Just the way it is. Now, out of Mid-Eastern honor, out of Middle East honor, out of Holy Land honor, out of Jewish honor, could any of those people have turned him away? No. This dude's famous. Everybody knows him. So what happened, Michael? Well, I'm glad you asked. Merry Christmas. Happy Father's Day. I mean, Okay. So Joseph is returning to the village of his origin. Everyone would have known that. Joseph is famous. Okay, we got that. Now, let me also throw another monkey wrench in this whole story. If you remember a couple weeks ago that when Mary first got pregnant, she went to whose house? Way to go. You can go back in Luke 1 if you want to read it. But she went to Elizabeth's house. Okay, so Elizabeth was part of her extended family. Okay, so let's just say hypothetically Joseph rolls into Bethlehem, and, they're coming in late, and he can't find any place to stay. People reject him. Oh, no, you're not David's son. We don't want anything to do with you. Oh, no, you're not from here. You're an outsider. We don't want anything to do with you. And he gets rejected. Where would the first place he would go be? I didn't tell you this. Elizabeth and Zechariah's house is in Judea. Bethlehem is also in Judea. It's a very short distance between the two. If he couldn't find a place to stay in Bethlehem, where would he have gone? Zechariah and Elizabeth's house. And if he didn't, her whole family would hate on him forever. You let our daughter have a baby in a barn? I'm telling you, it's honor. It's honor. So if Joseph didn't have a place to stay, all he would have had to do is skip on over to Zechariah and Elizabeth's home, and they would have welcomed him. Okay, let's keep going. All right, let's just touch on 2:6 one more time. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. My best guess is that Joseph is a responsible, super smart man, and he left in plenty of time for her to travel 5 months, 6 months pregnant, I don't know, but to get there in time for them to make adequate preparations. He would have known 8, 10, 15, 20 families who all would have opened their homes to him. He would have made great preparations. He wouldn't have run in hot and late. He wasn't a goofball. He would have had some place or some plan, and even if the plan fell short, he had family nearby. So he knew he had probably my guess is a multi-layered plan. Okay, so let's shift the question, and then we'll kind of come back and begin to tie this all together. So where did they stay? Where did they stay? Whew, okay, let's open this up. So most homes in the Holy Land, it's the same as today in Africa and in the Middle East, had 2 rooms. One of the rooms was exclusively for guests, like what we would call a mother-in-law suite. The other room was the family room where the whole family slept, ate, cooked, and lived. This was often connected to the house was often like a lower part of the house. Sometimes, because there were flat roofs in the Holy Land, things were built out of rock, they would actually build the guest room on the roof. So the roof's flat, they could put a guest room on the roof, or they'd put a guest room at the back. Sometimes these houses were actually built into caves. So they would start in the cave, and then the outside of the house would extend out from the cave. But for the last 3,000 years, the standard home in the Holy Land has how many rooms? 2. A guest room and a family room. Okay, so let's keep going here. So I don't have time to open up the Greek here for you, but there's two Greek words, especially in the New Testament, that are used for inn or room. One, pandochion, is actually an inn. It's like a formal inn, okay? That is not what Luke uses here. So in fact, let me just pause, and you don't have to turn here, but Matthew 2:11 says this. Matthew 2:11. So this is when the Magi come visit the Messiah. Verse 9, after they heard the king, Herod, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. So who are we talking about here? Wise men. The wise men are following the star. Okay, the star stops over the place where the child was. Where's the child? Well, we think in a stable or a barn or something. That's what we think, right? All right. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. Verse 11. On coming to the house. Matthew 2:11. Circle it. You can make a note. On coming to the. Did it say barn? Did it say stable? Did it say cave? On coming to the house. So now go back to Luke 2, when it says no guest room available to them is what my NIV translation says. Luke here does not use the word for commercial inn. He uses the word for place to stay or room, guest room. So if I flip to the end where Jesus sends his disciples to look for a room to celebrate the Passover in, right before he goes to the cross, it's the same Greek word. So Jesus is looking at the end of the Gospel of Luke, Jesus is looking for a room in which to have Passover. So he's looking for someone to give him use of their guest room so that he can celebrate Passover communion with his disciples before he's crucified. The very same word that Luke uses here, which says to me, Luke's a super intelligent doctor, the author of this book. He's not going to use different words for different things. So when he says the same Greek word here, no guest room, he's actually talking about not a commercial inn, but a house. All right, let's keep going. So this is used as a space in the house. Okay, I've got a slide I'm going to put up here now. It's actually a little rendering. There it is. Look at that. Ian, I'm moving off the stage. I'm going to give you a headache, man. Okay, so let's go over here for just a second. All right, so this is a basic rough diagram of what a New Testament home would have looked like. The last 3,000 years, this is a basic Middle Eastern layout of a house. Yeah? Okay, so what do we have in the very back? That's the guest room, and that's the Greek word for it, okay? So it's a space, it's a guest room. And then you see the what? Family room. So what happens in the family room? Everything. We eat, we cook, we hang out, we sleep. The whole family lives in there. Now, when a special guests come, because honor is so important, hospitality is so important in the Middle East, where do they stay? In the guest room. I could take you through so many scriptures, like this is also called the prophet's chambers. It's like this is just so important in the Middle East. When a person comes through, what are they given? A guest room. It's the way it is, hospitality. Okay, now you notice two things. What are those two little circles going towards the front of the house? Mangers. Now here's what happened. In the Middle East, they had, we're at like the turn of time, so we're entering into Common Era, CE, so it's like 234 CE. So in that time, they had great burglar systems, right? They have alarm systems? They have fire alarms? Carbon monoxide? Like, do they have anything? So how do you protect your stuff from getting stolen? Come on, you bring it in. So at night, the most valuable things to you are your donkey. Most people didn't have a horse, but if you had a horse, your cows and your sheep. So at night, they get brought where? Into the family living room. And you break out some hay. Come on. And where do you put it? In the manger. And what is a manger? A place where the animals eat. Now, was it at times unpleasantly smelling in the family living room? Probably. But here's what happened. The morning came, everyone gets up. What do they do with the animals? They take them out to the outer courtyard, which is called a stable. Even in the Middle East, even now, if we took you there would be a big wall all the way around that stable area. They often put broken glass or rock on the top of it to keep out intruders. Like this, the most important thing to you is not your bank account and your credit card. The most important thing to you is your animals, and you bring them close at night. Now, here's the other thing. You're in the middle of the desert, and at night, the desert is cold. And what does bringing all your animals into the living room do? Makes the house warm. Might make it a little smelly, but it makes it warm. Okay, now, so in the day, they get up, all the sheep and, whatever, cow, donkey, whatever's there, goes out into the stable, often out into the fields to eat, and then they're going to clean the entire living room. So it would have had a slight downward slope. They're going to sweep everything, clean up the manger, sweep everything down those steps, out the front door, and that is what everyone's doing in the morning, every morning, because that's what you do in the Middle East. You tracking with me? Okay, Grace, keep this up for just a second. So, let's go back to Luke 2, verse 7. And she gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. So what wasn't available? The guest room. Now why? Probably because the census was being taken, everyone's family was visiting, everything was jammed full, but there was nothing dishonorable about staying in the living room, like nothing. So let's just play this out for a second. Mary and Joseph come, all the guest rooms are full, they end up staying in somebody's family living room. Mary's getting closer and closer to giving birth. She starts having contractions, starts giving birth. All the men are told to get out of here and take the animals, right? So they're out in the stable area or they're out in the street, and everyone in the whole city would have known that there's a baby being born, right? Everyone's standing outside waiting, and they're getting updates, and all the animals are there, and everything's going on. And Mary would have been tended for by the absolute finest that the people, the peasants and the poor people in Bethlehem had to offer. Was Jesus born alone in a barn? Most likely not. She probably gave birth in a very ordinary, very normal peasant home in the living room. The guest room was full for some reason. Maybe there was a sick in-law. Who knows what was going on there? But she gave birth probably in a living room. There would have been straw and swaddling clothes. She wrapped the baby in swaddling clothes and laid him in the manger, which may have been hewn out of the floor or may have been built out of wood. Both happen. If it's in a cave, and this doesn't defy the cave either, because the guest room could have been the cave or the family room could have been the cave, and then the house is built out from there. So Jesus was very much, I would say, cared for. Do I think it was the Ritz-Carlton? No. But I would say to you, based on everything I can understand and my knowledge of Middle Eastern honor, and then the way that Jewish people take care of their own, and when it comes time to give birth, people rallying around, regardless of how she got pregnant or their perception of how she got pregnant, she would have had the absolute best care possible. Was it as good as our hospitals? Probably not. Was it as comfortable as midwives do today? Probably not. But was it the best they had to offer? 100%. Once she gave birth, everything's cleaned up. Would the animals have been brought back in? Yeah. Okay. So let's just make some concluding statements that maybe can strip away some of what we've built up around this whole thing. I would say to you, Joseph is not an inept and inadequate husband who doesn't know how to book an Airbnb. I mean, we paint him like a total loser. Yeah, you can laugh. I think we do. It's just like he's a bonehead. It's the way we think of him in our little plays. Second point, Joseph did not seek a commercial inn in a town where he was considered royalty. He just wouldn't have. Everybody knew him. He was famous. He's not going to seek a commercial inn. He's going to stay with a family that knew him. I would also say that he arrived with plenty of time to make preparations for Mary and the birth of Jesus. I would say Jesus is born well after their arrival. They didn't come in hot on some worn-out donkey. She wasn't in labor, I would say. Another thought is Joseph didn't dare anger Mary's family by failing to turn to them in a crisis. Zechariah and Elizabeth would have been furious with him if he let her give birth in some barn. So the child would have been born in a peasant home, wrapped in cloths, laid in fresh straw in a manger, like every other peasant child born at that time. And then I think the last thing or two that I would say is the villagers in Bethlehem are not some hard-hearted ogres who let this poor woman give birth in a barn. There's just no way. So they gave her the best of what they had to preserve their honor, even as a village. So the manger was probably in a warm and a friendly home. It wasn't a cold and lonely stables. The cow and or the donkey and or the sheep may have been let back in after the baby was born. But here's what we have. We have the incarnation of Jesus being complete. So here's a couple takeaways, very simple. Jesus chose the ordinary to demonstrate his great love for us. Jesus chose the common to meet us in our humanity. And if there's anything about this that encourages me, is that Jesus so chose to be one of us, so chose the ordinary, so chose the common, so that you could know that he is interested in journeying with you and with me through our very common, very ordinary lives. That's what he's illustrating here. Jesus chose the simple to illustrate his desire to meet us in the simple, mundane, daily moments of our lives. That's it. Merry Christmas. Happy Father's Day.